No.
This is interesting because I'm kind of sick of my version of the story, and I've never heard your side of the story. So let's hear it.
I want to hear your side.
Okay, well, you go first.
All right. So I just spent about 2 months in Paris, and then I've been in Amsterdam, and then I was in Budapest for a month, and then I was on day 1 of being in Vienna. And I was walking outside my hotel, and as usual, zero plans for the day. And I just heard this like commotion in like the Central Park. And if anybody's been to Vienna, incredibly classy, very cultured city. It's just unbelievable. The orchestras, the symphonies, it's amazing. And there's this giant grouping of people, probably like 10,000 people sitting in a park, and there was a 100-foot by 100-foot screen. I don't know if I'm exaggerating, but it was pretty damn big.
So random is why I'm laughing. It's such a
random thing. Well, here's what's even more random is that so the opening act was this wonderful symphony. So it was this classical music, but the headliner was Queen's concert. So Queen the band, and it was live from Budapest, which was the place, or Budapest as they say, which was exactly where I just arrived from. And this was apparently the first concert, the rock concert, that had been performed outside of, like, in the former Soviet Union. So when the wall went down in Germany, this was the first rock band that actually played in a former Soviet, basically, I guess, satellite state. So they're playing Queen, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. All these people are sitting around drinking beer, watching it while they're drinking wine, and I'm like, okay, I need to wet my whistle. So I decided to walk through the crowd, and as there's a sea of people, obviously I don't recognize anybody, it's Austria, and partying, like through the partying sea, through the crowd, all of a sudden I see a familiar face. A good buddy of mine. I had no idea he was in Europe, let alone in Austria. And it was Hamid, sitting right across from me.
Holding 2 beers. What was funny about like where we met was we were in like almost like the mosh pit of the people. There was like a walking area which was way too crowded. So I had kind of cut into the crowd.
Me too.
And we're literally cutting through the crowd. And I'm holding 2 beers. And I just I'm like, what? It's one of my biggest regrets in life is I really should have been, you want beer? But I was in shock to be my usual self. I was like, what? And I knew that you'd gone on this sabbatical. I had no idea where you were. I thought you were.
Nobody did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's such a random experience. But, that was like, that whole thing was a trip. First of all, like a bunch of people in Austria watching that concert and singing along. Don't y'all speak German? Like they
knew every word. Big Queen fans.
Yeah, Queen's iconic though.
Yeah,
it is. But like, it was like a fucking Tuesday. It was a Tuesday.
I'm sure it was. I have no idea.
Yeah, there's so much culture over there, man. It's crazy. Like, it was their city hall, and their city hall is this like old sort of building. Think of like the gargoyles style, like old historic building. And right up against the building, they have this giant screen. And every day for like a month, there's something going on in that place. Free, and then there's like booze and food to be
cards,
picked
like
up. And
true culture.
It was really cool, man. I love that city. I think of it as like Vancouver with European culture. Like it was almost identical. Like lots of nature, not like backyard nature like we have it, but in the city it was very green. Mm-hmm. They have the exact same transportation system. They have the SkyTrain. Like it's the exact same thing. But you have like injections of like thousands of years of history there, which is cool. It was very crazy. I really like that city.
And then what we did afterwards was great too. Do you remember?
So what we did was, we grabbed a couple more drinks when the thing was over at a restaurant. And I think it was around 11 o'clock or something like that, where things were closing down, on a Tuesday. And I don't even know how we came to this idea. Probably your idea.
Probably.
Wouldn't be mine. Was let's go to a karaoke bar in Austria. So sure enough, pop your phone open. Where's the nearest karaoke bar? And we go to this place, like basement level.
Oh, it was so perfect. It's like karaoke in Austria. It was like you go to kind of a little bit of a seedy area. It was subterranean. It was in the basement level. Through these like dingy, dark. This place is open at 1 o'clock on a freaking Tuesday, and packed of a bunch of just Austrians singing. Just whatever.
Yeah, a lot of college kids. Yeah, it was a Tuesday night. It was crazy.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that was your first...
Oh, yeah, I've never done karaoke before that, so it was fun.
And it took a good, hour and a half of him working up the confidence, working through...
I was getting drunk.
Yes,
I was like, more confidence, please. Yes, I'll take 2.
You looked at that binder 100 different times.
But that was a fun experience. It was definitely cool.
It wasn't. It was
If
great
I'm
when the
gonna-
guy came up on stage with me, like kind of, he's like, "Oh, you're singing Metallica? like, let me sing."
That's a long song, by the way.
was a very long song.
fucking long song.
It was a very long
It's like
song.
7 minutes on stage.
I think it was "Nothing Else Matters" by Metallica.
Oh, that is a long song.
Yeah,
But
they loved it. They were singing along, and one guy comes up on stage and like puts his arm around my shoulders and just starts singing with me. It was awesome.
That was a good night. It was very interesting. But just the whole like.
Am I confusing this trip with? Was there another instance where you guys both did some psychedelic drugs?
No, yeah, I never did.
No.
I can neither confirm nor deny the statement that you've made.
No, I don't think so. I've never really done any psychedelic drugs.
Oh, I thought-
I haven't. No, I've never done mushrooms or anything like that. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't have time. That's literally.
I'm confusing stories then.
No. I'm sure Ryan has had a few adventures with it, but he can share that if he wants to.
I say again, my handler, my publicist, my CEO, my
You're
wife.
not attached to anything, okay?
I'm not attached
you're
to
wearing
anything.
fucking Lululemon joggers and a bunny shirt, okay? If that's what your publicist chose, you should fire him. I'm pretty sure you're your own publicist, so.
I say again, I can neither confirm nor deny it.
All right,
but,
okay, you can say whatever you want on this podcast.
I'm definitely open to experiences. I think it's one of the things that we're too closed off. You know, I personally, I spent too many of my years saying no to life. And so I did this kind of whole paradigm shift where I decided to say yes to a lot more things, to a lot more experiences. And to a T, it's all worked out. So
I like it.
why not?
I'm with you as well. It wasn't a moment or like a moment of epiphany, rather. It was just kind of a gradual change that happened. And we were talking about Rogan. I think he has got a lot to do with introducing some of these, like, I was going to say drunk tank, the isolation tank. That was one of the first sort of psychedelic experiences of going into a tank and seeing what it's like to not feel anything at all. I think it's just good and that opens up other avenues as well. And it's good to that's kind of how I started. It was just kind of like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me try it. What have I got to lose? Right. Let's go up and do some karaoke singing. What have I got to lose? Right. It's just one of those things where.
But what's so interesting about that is that, and these were the conversations we were having at the time, where it's like, we're in Austria. Nobody fucking knows us here. Nobody knows us. You know, it's not on camera, except for me videotaping you, just so you have the moment. But it's so funny that our ego still, and our fear still holds us back. We're like, ugh, like they're going to judge me. I've never done, like, it's amazing that internal dialogue that happens, even though on a very logical level, there's no fucking reason why not? Why not?
Exactly, 100%. I had this exact same conversation with Malika yesterday. We're talking about, so she comes from maybe a little bit of background with her. I don't want to get too private, but she comes from essentially parents being raised more. Well, she was being raised with their parents in the hippie era, so she's had a very different experience in life as me. And her dad, especially, like still to this day, like long hair, mustache, like just a very free spirit guy, and you can sense that like the minute you talk to him. But we were talking about that exact same thing of like sort of like ego versus what's on the other. Well, actually, let me ask you this. So you got the ego, and then on the other side of the spectrum, what do you have?
I would call it either surrender or acceptance, where you accept what is, and you understand that chatter, that ego, that part of your mind is not actually real, and so you almost surrender to the moment. You're more present to what actually is.
My answer would have been the moment. It's either
Do you know what my girlfriend said?
What?
Love. That's on the other side of ego. And I thought it was beautiful. I was like, I
what?
never thought about it that way.
Well said. Yeah. It's all on the same end of the spectrum. Absolutely.
Blew my mind. But, I started to explain to her, like, look, I come from a scientific background. That's, to me, what got me into the dance was biology, right? That, to me, like, the idea of evolution and Darwinism and all that stuff was very cool. So I think of the ego as more of like an evolution.
Can I just pause you
Yeah,
there
please
for
go
one
ahead.
second? The funny thing about Darwin that nobody really understands or knows is that in his whole little treaty, whatever it is, the evolution of species, that whole treaty that he's very famous for, don't quote me on the numbers, but I think he mentions actual competition maybe 9 times in the entire, 600-page document. But he mentions cooperation 1,200 times. And somehow we've all just latched onto this survival of the fittest, this competition, eat dog type world. But the cooperative nature of nature is what allows everything to flourish.
There's a difference between cooperative and symbiotic.
I would put them all in the same category, right? It's on that end of the spectrum as opposed to the, and I understand like that whole, the Lion King, the evolution of life, very symbiotic, everything leads into each other. But, nature to flourish, it cooperates. And this is where I believe humanity has lost its way a little bit, where we've been sold the idea that we need to compete a lot more than we actually do.
But I can show you, maybe, I can attempt to show you how that path will get you to the same result. And that's what I was trying to get to. This is the conversation I was having last night, ironically. If you look at your ego as, let's call it a theory, as an evolutionary trait, it absolutely makes sense as well, right? What the ego does really well, like coming from, let's say you're talking about a baby being jealous of someone talking to their mother, right? There's that ego component to that essentially is there because it'll increase your chance of survival, right? The less attention you take away from my mom, the better my chances of survival. So it's advantageous to have that ego in the wild. However, much like right now, we got some hair on our arms here. I don't necessarily need this hair on my arms to survive in my society because I can control the temperature. And for that same reason, you don't necessarily need that evolutionary trait anymore because I'm not threatened by nature anymore, not in the same sense. So for that same reason, it's in your best interest to try to dissolve that as well. It's like
that Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about the fact that humans have kind of, conquered the food chain. He's like, you don't realize how easy we have it. Like, we don't have to ever worry about getting eaten by anything. It's like, imagine if that wasn't the case. Like, you got a shitty morning, you wake up, you're late for work. It's like, you burn your toast. God damn it. You're running late and you run outside and all of a sudden you're late for the subway. And then a fucking Jaguar is running off. You're like, God damn it, not this again.
There's an older bit where he talks about, goes to Chinatown and he finds all kinds of weird food and they're selling duck vaginas. Do you remember that one? No. He's like, how can you possibly dominate a species more than this? That you're selling their vaginas in a bucket with a scoop in it?
Vaginas.
But it's true. So I kind of going back to that, I think any way you look at it, it's at least worthwhile to try to dissolve it as much as you can.
Well, here's the way I look at it, is that there are so much more mental health issues that we have right now. We're so much more locked inside of our mental prisons. And I believe it's exactly what you said with your arms. It served a purpose at a certain stage. I mean, your ego, your mind, which we'll call it, it rationalizes things. It's always categorizing. It's always comparing. It's always trying to make sense of everything. And because it's been able to do that very well, we are where we are as a species, in the sense, good or bad. Technologically, we are where we are, but also, for lack of a better word, spiritually. That emotional intelligence that we have is also where we're at, because I believe that we're very separate from the rest of the world and from other people, always because that internal monkey brain chatter is always trying to judge, categorize what they're saying. Do I agree with it? Do I not? Is he attacking me? I feel like he's attacking me. I feel like this is over there. This person's doing better, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that all directly contributes to this dissatisfaction that most people feel. I mean, whether or not you want to admit it or not, most people are not happy. They're not. And I believe it's the ego.
But why are they not happy?
Because they live too much in their minds, too much in their egos. They've allowed their mind to they've listened to that internal chatter, as opposed to, like Hamid was saying with the float tank, shutting it down, embracing the silence, and then resetting yourself in that sense.
And it's so easy to do. Meditation, look at any kind of meditation you want to call, whether it's the tank, whether it's transcendental, or whatever form it is. All you're trying to do is distract the monkey brain. That's all you're doing. You say, hey, monkey brain, focus on your breath. And that's it. And once that's gone and you can do that for a long period of time, that's all there is to it. And I think anybody can do it. And it's so accessible. And people try to sell in all kinds of different ways. And it's like, hey, all you gotta do is do nothing and expect nothing. And that's what it comes down to. But it's so fucking hard to do. It's so hard to shut down the monkey brain.
We're all busy. Exactly what you said. We're too busy.
We're too busy. It's hard to shut down the monkey brain.
Chasing that proverbial carrot.
I don't know. I'm going to disagree. We're not.
Yeah, please.
We're not too busy.
Oh, we're absolutely not.
We're not.
But
Like,
we tell ourselves we are.
yeah, people waste a lot of fucking time, and then they think they're too busy for the important things. And like getting back to you saying like the ego and happiness, like my take on that is that people focus on the wrong things. Like it's the terrible social media syndrome where, think back to like our grandparents, like different generation, not connected the same way. You were happy based on your inner circle and who you were surrounded with. But you weren't being bombarded on your Facebook stream or on your Instagram stream of people collecting these moments. I mean, let's face it, like, while people maybe put like status updates on Facebook, like they're not posting pictures of a bad breakup or losing their job, they're in tears. It's always here's my new car, here's my new house, I just got engaged, here's my kid. It's all like these monumental things that people are genuinely proud of, which is great. But then you're getting outsiders looking in being like, okay, well, Ryan, like I go on Ryan's Facebook stream and, he's done this trip. He's talking about this big promotion. He just got engaged, blah, blah. And then I'm like, well, what's the matter with me? I don't have any of those things. Is there something wrong with me? Am I not as happy as Ryan? Why am I not experiencing the same things as Ryan? So rather than like just focusing internally on yourself and being content with your surroundings, I feel that we're in a society where it's so backwards, where we're basing our happiness off of what our circles or our feeds are telling us what we should be focused on and what we should be happy about, when it's completely fucking backwards.
A huge shift in consciousness is going to happen when we realize that sense of happiness, that sense of purpose, it sounds like a cliche, but it can only be found inside. And when we understand, like from a marketing point of view, from an advertising marketing point of view, the ego is incredibly powerful, so everything is marketed to that ego. I'm going to define myself based on what I drive, based on who I'm with, how hot my girl is, how nice my watch is, what I've done, the promotion, et cetera, et cetera. And the more that everybody keeps latching onto their identity based on material things, and not just material in the sense of like actual tangible things, but things that are external, you will always have a sense of suffering because of that, because all of that fades. None of it's real. It's all bullshit. And so many times you'll see the person that's incredibly successful monetarily, but very deficient when it comes to their relationships, happiness. Exactly. But yet, like you said, we don't see that side. We just see the yacht, the G5, whatever the private jet is, and we're like, oh, why don't I have that? What's wrong with me? Cut it all out. And I believe personally that's what this life is about seeing all these comparisons, by seeing the things that, what is it that actually makes me happy? What is it that's actually real? And going back, it's a bad analogy, but if you look at a dog, for example, people see a homeless guy with a dog, and you look at that dog, and most people will be like, oh, I pity that dog. He's sitting there on the street with some guy that's begging, et cetera, et cetera. And I always looked at that like, that dog is absolutely living way more authentically with what a dog is supposed to be doing than that prissy little dog that's being pushed around in a carriage that has all these fancy little Louis Vuitton dog toys, etc. You think the dog gives a crap about any of that stuff? The dog's natural purpose is to be a dog, is to live in the moment, to hunt, to get food, who knows when, to walk around, etc. It goes back to us as humans as well. We weren't meant to be sitting here spending all of our time working, trying to get money, trying to have a nicer Instagram feed, trying to do all this stuff. It takes us away from the thing that actually gives us satisfaction, which is that human connection, the experience, being present. That's it. It's very simple.
No, I think that's very well stated.
Is it possible to have a bit of both? That's always been my internal struggle, is like, can I still have a nice watch and still be in the moment?
If you don't let it, like if you don't let the chase of that materialistic side, like, determine who you are and dictate.
Exactly. Well said. If you don't identify with it, in other words, if that's not who I am not my fancy car, my fancy clothes, whatever. As long as you can be like, I want these things, and I understand consciously, I'm thinking about getting this because I give a symbol about something. As humans, we create symbols. Everything is symbols. We make meaning out of everything. And so if getting that nice watch represents something for you, like a talisman, like this means that I'm successful. This means that I was able to actualize or materialize all my hard work? This represents a certain amount of my dreams and success? Absolutely. But that's not you. Does that make sense? It's like, I'm
absolutely.
not the watch. I don't believe the clothes make the man. I don't believe that.
That's part of the reason I'm in this field. And to a certain extent, like, I believe you should be able to enjoy all those things, but I think you should be able to say goodbye to them on a whim, right? You should be able to give your watch to somebody and it shouldn't mean anything to you. So my thing was always, and this was shattered later on in my life, but my thing was always like, well, the only thing you really have in this world is your body. So I always took care of my body as long as I was old enough to. And then I saw some footage from, Nazi Germany, people getting shipped off to camps, and everybody, within months, they were all scrawny and their bodies withered away. And I realized, like, well, you don't even really have your body either. Like, people can control that. Like, what are you going to do some push-ups? And so it's an interesting thing where, like, you start to take away layers and you start to realize that, like, nothing matters more than you want it to.
It goes back to that. I mean, there's all the. Hamid knows that over the last 4 years, I've been just engrossed in all this esoteric, ancient literature. I'm trying to get as close to the source material as possible to find out.
And Tantra.
Tantra, you name it. Tantra, meditation,
Yes.
the whole thing. I want to explore it all.
What?
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. Meditate, Tantra, all that.
It's all part about understanding that there's the inner reality and there's the exterior reality, and the exterior reality is directly a byproduct of the inner reality. And I believe that our society and the system that we're in right now definitely rewards people that are only focused on the external reality to the detriment of the inner. And the closest thing that most people have is some sort of institutionalized religion to be like, ooh, be spiritual, have faith, do this, do a mantra, do this, and all the rest of that, which for most people, you'll poo-poo that because you're like, okay, who the fuck wants to be this dogmatic, little sheep? And I think it's just almost villainized any sort of exploration internally. And again, let's go with bling, 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 external. And that's why we've lost our way. That's why people aren't happy.
I think I want to give the human race a shout out here. I think you got to give people more credit. I think part of the reason people aren't necessarily as on any kind of a quest to find that internal dialogue is maybe they don't know any better. Like, I'm a good example. Like, if you look at the first 24 years of my life, I didn't necessarily know anything about meditation and this and that. It's also like empowering people with the tools that, hey, there's this thing out there and all you got to do is look inwards. If you've never been around that, let me put it this way. If anybody really truly knows about meditation, they're going to try it at some point in their life. Fact, right? There's people that are, you talk to them about some of this stuff and they're like, what? And then there's other people that are like, yes, I've heard of it. And the people who have heard of it have done it at some point in their life. So I think, ironically, we've gone to this technological state because of the ego. But at the same time, like, we can utilize that to have these conversations and have that sort of go back to exactly how I started. Like, I didn't start, thinking about spirituality and all these things. In fact, I stayed away from that stuff my whole life because of my upbringing. But at the same time, like, just seeing that, oh, it's not what I thought it was. It's just a matter of, it's this weird thing that we're all connected to and that we're all part of. And all you have to do is just look into that. I think just putting that message out there, why not? That's a good start.
I think it's